Bob Vander Plaats is, for lack of a better word, the John Stemberger of the state of Iowa. He runs the Family Leader, which is the Family Policy Council in Iowa. He's the author of Light from Lucas, where he talks about the account of his son Lucas, who was born with a very severe disability. Bob ran for governor, actually, of Iowa in 2010 and became very, very short, missed that mark, but God had another plan for him to lead in this capacity. Bob is, in my judgment, and he's probably going to cringe at me saying this, is one of the most influential persons in Iowa politics. The Miami Herald once called me one of the most influential men you've never heard of. That's really true about Bob. When Rick Santorum was at 0%, Bob had a small coalition of leaders around the country, endorsed Rick Santorum, and brought him to literally win the Iowa primary. So Bob is a very significant player in American presidential politics because of his overly important geography and real estate that he lives in.
Well, good evening. I'm really glad I get to go now.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Pastor Clayton and Brother Bill and Bishop Jackson, along with my peer John Stemberger, for all participating in this, and of course for you taking the time, out of a Tuesday evening to come here to listen to this. And some of the words you just heard on this podium, it's probably the first time those words have ever been uttered on this podium, would be my guess. I want to speak real briefly. I'm going to change some of my remarks. I want to speak real briefly to a point that Bill brought up. Darla and I have been married for 33 years, and I have a deep commitment to that woman. And that is, if she ever leaves me, I'm going with her, okay? Darla and I have 4 boys. She argues she has 5, we have 4, okay? Our 3rd son is significantly disabled, born with a very rare brain disorder called partial pachygyrial encephaly. Wasn't supposed to live for 2 days, then not 2 weeks, then not 2 years. And today, although he cannot walk, cannot talk, major seizure disorder, tracheotomy, full spinal fusion, he's just a tremendous blessing at age 23. And I got to tell you, it knocked me to the core when I saw a president or a candidate for president of the United States mock a person with disabilities. But I've got to tell you, as much as that hit me, and believe me, this is where the choices are hard, right? We're having a tough conversation tonight. Choices are hard. We're honest about this. As much as that hit me, the reality came when a peer of mine came to me and said, Bob, but remember, Hillary would have that child aborted. Choices are hard. Because of the geography that John talks about where I live in the state of Iowa, as soon as the presidential election is over with, when Mitt Romney lost in 2012, the very next day I got calls by people who want to be president of the United States. Some of them even started cultivating that ground earlier because they thought Mitt Romney would lose. One of those people was Donald Trump. I consider Donald Trump a friend of mine, and most days he may consider me a friend to him. Now, there's days I'm sure he doesn't think I am. It was on my stage when I invited him to a leadership summit where he made the comment that he has never asked God for forgiveness. It was on my stage where he said he likes veterans who weren't captured. And when Frank Luntz was doing the interviewing of the candidates that day on the stage that I presented in front of 3,000 Iowans who were going to end up caucusing, I thought, this campaign is over. We just witnessed the Howard Dean moment. There's no way this guy goes on. But I fully believe we underestimated the pent-up emotion that exists in this country with Washington, D.C., and that it's broke, it does not represent us, and I don't even care if it's wrong, I'm willing to blow it up to get it right. I think that's what happened here. For many of the reasons that Bill iterated and that John so articulately stated in many of his articles about Trump, I did not endorse Mr. Trump. I endorsed Ted Cruz. I went all in for Ted Cruz. I thought we could have a principled conservative running against Hillary Clinton. Now, whether you like Ted Cruz or not, I was Mike Huckabee's state chair in 2008 when he ran for president. I endorsed Rick Santorum. Bobby Jindal was a friend. Rick Perry was a friend. The list goes on. I had a lot of friends in this race. And I thought a lot of them would do an excellent job. As a matter of fact, when I get a chance to go to churches now and speak, many times I get asked, this is the choice we've got? These are our choices? And when I remind the church, the body of Christ, all the time, this presents a huge opportunity for the church. A huge opportunity for the church to be light into a world that is seeking and that is searching. And I believe the church needs to be the church. I think for too long we have put our hope into political candidates and in political parties. It reminds me when Jesus was at the height of his ministry and Peter and the disciples were walking along with Jesus. Jesus was predicting how he'd be captured, how he'd be persecuted, how he'd be tortured, how he'd be beaten, and how he'd be put to death. And Peter took him aside and said, whoa, 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 that is not going to happen. We've got a good thing going on here. You see the crowds? You're doing these drive-by miracles. This is awesome. Just keep it up. We're going to overtake Rome. It says Peter rebuked Jesus. And Jesus looked at Peter and said, get behind me, Satan. Why? Because Peter's focus was on the temporary. Peter's focus was on the things of this world. And Jesus says, my mission is much bigger than this. My mission is much bigger than this. And for we as the body of Christ, I believe we need to take that with us. Regardless of who we elect, our mission is much bigger. We should not be disqualified. We should not be compromised for the ultimate of prizes. We have a culture that is sprinting away from the heart of God. In Hebrews, it talks about drifting away from the heart of God. I believe today we are sprinting away from the heart of God. And unless we as a culture turn our hearts back to God, his principles, his precepts, in full pursuit of his righteousness, it does not matter who we elect. America does not have a hope that it once had unless we completely turn back to him. 2016, I believe, is big, but it's like putting a finger in the dike. The church needs to think bigger. We need to be the Nathan to the David, the prophet to the king. There needs to be a restored relationship here. Because the power, as Clayton talked about, and the power, as Bill talked about, is not in the President of the United States. It is not in the Supreme Court of the United States. It is in we, the people. The founders gave us the right of being the king. And the people need to get it right. The people need to get it right. We need to be a prophetic voice to the culture. You take the church's voice out from a culture, which we have done, and you'll get to a point where you don't even know what restroom you should use anymore. Think about that.
Yeah.
We need to restore the prophetic voice to the culture. We need to be after God's standards, not a party, not a candidate. We need a revival in this country like none other. When Ronald Reagan announced he was running for president in 1980, matter of fact, it was 1979, he said, I believe this country hungers and thirsts for a spiritual revival. And I believe that more than ever today, that this country hungers and thirsts for the church to be the church and for a spiritual revival to sweep this land. That's what I believe we should put our hope into. I have not endorsed and I will not endorse in this race. I will vote. But here'd be my counsel to you. I would not make a theological argument for however you vote. I don't think a theological argument can be made. If you want to make a practical argument about appointing Supreme Court justices, I get that. You want to make a practical argument about who you're going to surround yourself with because it's a team of people, I get that. If you want to make a practical argument about repealing the Johnson Amendment, holding firm to religious liberty, I get that. But I would not compromise the gospel by making a theological argument. Now I'm going to end with this. This is what I said to Mr. Trump when I was in his office after Ted Cruz suspended his campaign. It was mid-June. I said, Mr. Trump, I'm going to be a friend to you. I'm going to be a real friend. I'm not going to be a lapdog and tell you that everything you do is great. When you do wrong, I'm going to tell you you do wrong. And when you do right, I'm going to cheer you on for doing right. That's what friends should do. And that's what the church should do this election. We should not go blindly in just support of a candidate. We should let them know when they do wrong and when they do right.
Thank you, Bob. So you have some millennials in your household, some young men that you've raised, and I know that millennials...
Darla has raised.
Okay, thank you. That's appropriate. I think it seems to me that a lot of young people are more likely to not vote for Trump, people that are older, perhaps in the same age range or something, perhaps they've been around. Is it just the frontal lobe development? What is it? Why are older people more likely to vote for Trump? You missed an opportunity on the frontal lobe development. That was a joke.
I missed it too. John, let me go back to a thing that I was a teacher. I was an educator.
So let me be very specific with you.
Okay.
Do we do harm? I think that one of the arguments made by Eric Erickson and others is that we do harm to the gospel when we support Donald Trump. You indicate that you're not going to endorse him, but you are going to vote for him. Is that really a difference with a distinction? And do we do disservice to the gospel by supporting someone like this?
Well, I think it's a big distinction between endorsing someone and ending up voting for someone.
Okay.
And there's a huge distinction. You talk about the young people, and believe me, when I'm around young people, I'm around them a lot. They're the ones who are holding me to task, holding me to account. Because you can fool a fool and you can con a con, but you cannot kid a kid. Kids are looking for authenticity. And they're saying, Dad, you said marriage is important to you. This is not being championed in this campaign. You're saying the sanctity of human life is important to you. But it's reported that Planned Parenthood does good things. You're saying these things. I mean, so I think that's why I'm saying about if you get there in support, if you get there in voting for whoever you vote, don't compromise the light. The light needs to shine bright. And that means where you say, you know what? He's flawed, she's flawed, whatever it is, and then let them know when they do wrong, and then let them know how you arrived at this decision yet. Just don't go blindly and being a lapdog and saying, I'm all in, I'm all in, I'm all in. This is a tough election.
Great.
And we need to address it that way.